Hey, welcome to Fish Innovation. Exciting show here today. We got Justin Hillsberg joining us, one of the premier members of a cold email outreach strategy. He is one of the top of the game folks I had the pleasure of meeting with not too long ago. And I wanted to have him on the show to talk about his vision, his journey, his background, and the success he's able to bring his clients. Justin, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ben.
So, one of the first things I like to do is have folks talk about their vision and journey. So how about you talk to folks about how you got started and what brought you there and where you're headed?
Sure. Yeah. So, I worked a lot of corporate jobs, specifically in marketing and copywriting the few years before I started my agency officially. And I kind of understood how corporate marketing worked. And I kind of saw a lot of inefficiencies with it as well, especially in these larger companies, especially when it came to cold outbound. And I figured what I was doing there, I could most definitely do by myself and make a much larger impact and make it a lot more streamlined than what I've seen with a lot of these bigger corporations. So that's essentially exactly what I did. So I started iClient Care back in 2020, and we did have a few other services alongside cold email. But the biggest thing that I saw was cold email just worked so much better for B2B than anything else that I was doing on the side. So anything like ads, SEO, social media. Cold outbound was just different because you're talking directly to your target audience. You're literally reaching out to those people that you want to do business with, like no other. So we really zeroed down on it by the end of 2020. And from there, we've really just taken off. And obviously, we've perfected the process along the way over the past 4 or 5 years. And now we're at the point that we're at now.
That's awesome. What industry were you in before? Is it retail, sales, e-commerce?
Yeah, so I bounced around a lot. I worked for a gastroenterology company. So we targeted like a lot of doctors' offices, trying to find partnerships and referrals and all of that. And I did a lot of work in the real estate niche as well. So I worked with a lot of the big real estate brands, Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, Corcoran. Did a lot of email marketing for them, and then I did a little bit more healthcare before I kind of figured I could probably do this on my own. And yeah, that's pretty much my experience before that.
That's great. I mean, healthcare, I know I get a lot of questions from folks about HIPAA and outreach, and they're worried about how you do it. Have you realized any of that, or do you have any clients who are really concerned about doing outreach in the healthcare space?
Not specifically in the healthcare space, but there are a lot of industries where they are concerned that they don't want to violate, specific laws or anything like that when doing outbound. So every client that we bring in, we really personalize that approach and we make sure that we follow those specific guidelines for each client that we work with, given that we do work with a wide variety in the B2B space.
That's awesome. Thinking about strategy and everything, I'm interested in hearing about what it is about your cold email strategy that you do that has made it become so effective with your campaigns and outreach.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest problems that people face when they're running cold email is typically that they're just not landing in the inbox. They're getting into spam consistently. And especially with these new updates from Google and Microsoft, it's become a lot more difficult to consistently land in the inbox of your target audience, of your prospect, right? So everything that we do, at least on the technical side of cold email, is to ensure that we're actually landing in the inbox and giving the prospect the opportunity to open our email. If you're landing into spam, your open rate's not going to be good. Your response rate's not going to be good. You're not going to book calls. You're not going to get revenue, right? So a lot of what we do on the technical side is to make sure that we're landing in the inbox. And we do that by adding spin tags to all the copy, triple verifying all the email lists that we're sending out, segmenting the emails properly to make sure that we're not going over our daily limit. When it comes to cold email, you can't really send out more than 30 to 35 emails per email address per day. So we make sure that we segment those emails properly. So if you want to send out 300 emails per day, you're going to need 10 email accounts. If you want to send out 3,000 emails per day, you're going to need more email accounts, right, to make up for that specific number. So a lot of technical aspects like that, we kind of perfected the process of along the way, to ensure that we're actually landing in the inbox.
Yeah, and that makes total sense because thinking about how the funnel works, deliverability is at the top, right? So if you're only able to have 100 people, let's say, and you're only able to talk to 10 of them, well, now you only have an opportunity to close a sale or an opportunity out of 10. Whereas if your deliverability is close to 100%, now you have 100 people, right? So I think that's really important. And, one thing I noticed too is it's great. You have that control. I think one of the things you and I talked about, which I thought was really interesting, was the copy, that being really important for folks. And how do you elicit sort of that like psychological response? And I know one of the things you mentioned was, it's very specific, the subject line and the body of the text. Is there anything you'd like to expand upon, within that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So we essentially have a cold email copy framework. It's kind of like an SOP that we follow whenever we're writing cold email copy. And the beauty of it is that it can relate to any industry. It's not industry specific or market specific. You can use this exact framework for literally anything that you're writing. It's what we've seen work over the past 5 years. Of course, we, kind of tweaked it as we went along, but this specific sequence that we follow now has gotten us amazing results for ourselves and the clients that we work with as well. So for the subject line, you just don't want it to be long, no more than 5 to 6 words, preferably less. And you also don't want it to sound super generic, right? So no quick question or just naming what the service is, those typically will not get opened as much. You want to focus specifically more so on the pain point, right? So what is the prospect actually struggling with? What's the obstacle that they're trying to get over? That's something that you should really highlight in that subject line. That typically gets the highest open rates. And as far as the body of the email, you kind of want to focus on that same thing. So you started off, the hook should really be the pain point, right? What is the prospect struggling with? What's an obstacle that they're looking to get over? That's really important. From there, you kind of want to bridge it now to the solution. What is the solution to that pain point? Whatever the prospect's struggling with, how are you able to get them over that hump and then to the end goal, whatever that might be, right? So pain point, solution, and then case study. Because again, this is cold email. These people have no idea who you are. They don't trust you. They don't even want to respond to you half the time, right? So you need to make sure that you've built that credibility, at least in that initial email, to even have a chance of getting a response, let alone a book call, let alone a close. Right? And the case study should always be quantifiable. You saved Nick X amount of time. You made Ben X amount of money, right? Just so that the prospect has an idea of what they can get, given that they do take you up on your service, right? So pain point, solution, case study, and then the last part's the call to action. And the biggest thing with the call to action, the big mistake I see a lot of people make is they're immediately pitch slapping and they're saying, hey, do you have 10 minutes next week to meet really quickly on this, right? No one's going to book a call with you. They do not know you or do not trust you. Right? You need to build relationships. You need to nurture with cold email. So you don't want to immediately pitch a call or anything like that. You want to nurture the prospect. And how you do that typically is you'll offer a lead magnet. You want to give a lot of value up front. So say, hey, I have a PDF detailing the 10 best subject lines for cold email. Can I send that over? Right? Or, hey, I'll run a free cold email campaign for you for 1 month, right? Something where you're giving a ton of value up front is what's going to solicit those positive responses. And then from there, you nurture that relationship, build it, and then you close down the line. That's essentially our entire framework for cold email. And it's what we've seen work again and again and again. So yeah, that's what I would say as far as strategy goes for the copy.
I love that. You're able to basically get a complete stranger to say, okay, an instant relationship. I know psychologically, when we meet someone, I think our brains, what is it? Like Malcolm Gladwell, so first 2 to 3 seconds, we know exactly if we want to maintain this relationship. And I think I've heard the same thing about cold email, right? You get about 2 or 3 seconds. So the subject line, you're right, very clear. Is it resonating with them? And then you see that subject line of a quick question. They're not there to answer questions, right? But when you get the pain point and they're like, how does Justin know me?
Mm-hmm.
And then they read through, they probably don't want to say, where can I spend my money? After reading a few sentences from a stranger, they're probably like, all right, well, this person's offering me, something for free. That's awesome. I do have this pain point. Let's see if what this company can do is effective. And if it is, then now I've found that grounding or that time moment of investment where now I might say, hey, I should probably sign up with this person. So I love that it's being able to get it across to the prospect or the consumer, however, potential client, and starting off on the right foot too, being able to have that relationship to begin with. That's really awesome. So speaking of outreach, I'd love to hear, you've been doing this a long time, what would be sort of like the funniest, whatever, what is the best cold outreach story that you could tell?
Sure. Yeah. So this is something that actually happened somewhat recently within the last few months, I believe. So we work with a company that offers aquamation, which is essentially cremation for animals in the form of water instead of fire. So it's a lot better for the earth, It's very eco-friendly, and you actually get the remains of the animal rather than the ash. So they're a really awesome company. They're very innovative. So we do cold outreach for them towards veterinarians to try to, elicit partnerships, and find vets in their local area. So we were running a campaign. This was like the first or second campaign that we were running for them. And we reached out to someone, I forget his name. Let's say his name was Ben. And then that aquamation company, they went to an event. I think it was the same day that we sent that email out, and they had a booth, and, they had people come to the booth to ask questions about their process and everything like that. And someone comes up and they're exchanging information, they're talking. And the guy's like, I believe you sent me an email this morning, actually. And the client's like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, like I got an email from your name, about this company, and you're here. And it was just a really funny moment where we had sent a cold email out. They actually met in person before the guy even responded. And then they ended up closing. They ended up forming that partnership. So I thought that was really awesome, because that cold email was actually kind of like the forefront and the foundation for them meeting. They were able to build that relationship just from that email, just because they thought it was funny, and they ended up working together.
That's great. I mean, that hits upon like another great area of like timeliness, right? I mean, just like had you maybe sent that out 2 weeks prior, there's no way that potential client or current client, would have remembered anything, and it might have just been another passing. But the fact that it made total sense to send that out for folks that might have been attending that conference, you now had a whole, maybe more than just him, was able to recognize, oh yeah, that name does sound familiar. Oh, I see that, maybe I should learn more about that. I love that. That's such a great story. Speaking of clients, you have a lot of information to offer, a lot of education, a lot of help when you bring these clients through. Is there something that the typical or average client, right, that you end up onboarding, is there something that they're not thinking about when it comes to outreach that you've been able to help them realize is important?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in general, there is a very big gap in knowledge of how really effective cold outbound works. I work with a lot of folks that, usually business owners, especially if you're not in the marketing space, you just don't have a lot of that marketing mindset that a lot of us obviously in the agency space have. So I think there definitely are some gaps of knowledge, especially when it pertains to the copy more than anything. Typically, one thing that I see a lot is that when we're going over the copy and we're going over kind of what we're going to write and everything, and I send them the first draft. With the revisions, typically they'll want to structure the copy more so like how you'd see it in a traditional advertisement rather than outbound. And by advertisement, I mean something maybe on Facebook ads, Google ads, or like a flyer on your local telephone pole, right? Something where it's more geared for inbound rather than outbound, because there's really two different approaches and way that you want to kind of frame the copy when you're writing for inbound and when you're writing for outbound. Inbound, you more so want the prospect to take the action, right? So you'd be like, click here to learn more, or we're founded 10 years ago, and you kind of talk more so about you than the prospect. With outbound, you want to talk about the prospect, not about yourself. And you want yourself to take the action instead of the prospect. So instead of saying, oh, click here to learn more, you say, would you be against me sending over more information? Do you mind if I send over more information? You want to take that action instead of having the prospect do it, because again, cold outbound, they don't know you, they don't trust you. So you want to be able to provide the value and give everything. So it's completely different from inbound and outbound. I think that's one thing that I see a lot when I'm onboarding new clients, is they still have that kind of like inbound framework structure when it comes to writing the copy.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that, because again, you're trying to make that connection with somebody on an outbound. If you just start talking about yourself, they're like, what does this guy want? Like, whereas you get them to open up about themselves, they're more likely to be invested in the conversation. This random stranger's asking about me. I love talking about myself. Let's connect. Yeah, of course, or sure, send me whatever. I'd love to know why you like me or why you picked me. That's really interesting. Like, I know there's a lot of different ways to match up your strategies, with the certain industries, and you're picking your ideal customer profile. And I mean, there's a lot to it. I don't think a lot of people understand like how many variables exist within this type of strategy. They might think, oh, I just write an email. That's not hard. Like everything you just said here, I could follow, but there's a lot more to it. Given your marketing background, how have you thought about sort of like omni-channel outreach from a cold outreach perspective? So we've talked about email, but and this is your opinion, do you see other channels that I'm sure all of us are very aware today of getting tons of outreach from, but do you see any channels today that are effective or using an omni-channel approach And then also, are there any channels that maybe are underutilized in from a cold outreach perspective that you might see as a gold mine opportunity?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think an omni-channel approach, it's not crucial, but it's very, very, very helpful when you're doing cold outbound, especially if you're reaching out to the same people. So if you're sending a cold email to a specific target audience, and then you use that same list and you reach out to them on a platform like LinkedIn and you're following up on there, and now they're seeing you not once just on email, but now twice on their LinkedIn as well. That helps a lot with just them even just being aware of your brand and who you are. And then also they're just a lot more receptive to answering, just because now they're a little bit familiar with your name, and given that you do have a pretty solid offer that's relevant to them, it is a lot more helpful to do so. But I mean, really any channel can be very effective. With cold outbound, it doesn't just have to be email. But I would say that the channel that you are using, like the platform that you're going to use, if it's on social media, it does matter depending on the industry. So if you're B2B, typically LinkedIn's going to be your best bet. An underutilized one that I've seen work very well is X. I don't think a lot of people are using X right now for outbound, but there's a lot of business owners. And again, it depends kind of like on the industry. There's a lot of business owners and any of your other target audience that are on X that can be reached out to. And there's a lot of tools that you can use also to kind of automate these processes, for really any social media platform. But X, I would say, is a really underutilized tool. But again, it really does vary depending on the industry that you're in and who your target audience is.
That's really interesting. X, I would have never thought that as being like a B2B channel. And I get it. There are businesses who are talking about whatever, maybe use it as customer service, or they use it as a way to promote their brand. Just want to pull on that thread for a little bit. So how does your strategy change with X? Is it still the same kind of structure of, I see your pain point, here's a case study, here's what it is? Or because it's social media and they're in a different mindset, instead of sitting in front of their computer, they're probably on their phone. Is there a different strategy that you would apply to X?
Yeah, I mean, you would essentially use the same framework. I would say maybe on social media, maybe make that copy even more concise and shorter and really try to consolidate it really nicely. But as far as kind of like the overall framework and the structure, you're ultimately going to keep it the same, because again, you need to make sure you're resonating with their pain point. You need to have the solution, you need to have the case study, and then you need to have the call to action, right? But if you can consolidate maybe a little bit more like on social media, it really does go a long way. And with email too, you also want the copy very short. No one's going to read a long essay of you just pitching them, right? You always want the copy to be super short, maybe like 3 or 4 sentences. But on social media, I would say maybe a little bit shorter if possible. But do you typically use the same approach for both?
That makes sense. So speaking of short, when we talked about this, cross as being the first outreach, do you see it as beneficial to do sort of like a drip campaign, right? So, you keep reaching out to them until they respond to you. Or do you think that's detrimental to your brand, or I'm not going to respond on the first one, I'm not going to respond on the second. I was nice, I didn't spam you, but now I'm going to get annoyed with you, I'm going to spam you. I mean, do you see the positive side, which is, oh, I'm so glad Justin wrote me again. Totally forgot about that. Yes, now I'm fully focused. What are your thoughts on that about doing one versus multiple outreach?
Yeah. So our number one rule of thumb when we're sending cold outbound is we follow up until we hear a clear yes or no from the prospect. And that doesn't mean that we're following up every single day, every 2 days. We're going to follow up with a prospect, whether it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, until we get a clear yes or no. And because of this, typically you'll hear salespeople say it takes 10 to 12 touch points to close a deal, right? And the same goes for cold outbound. I've had clients for myself where I've reached, maybe we had a conversation and then it kind of just went nowhere. And I would follow up every 2 weeks, every month. Hey, just wanted to check in. Hey, here's a quick case study. Here's someone in a relevant industry that we just helped generate $30,000 for last month, whatever it is, right? Just following up like that. I have closed clients after 6 months of no answer, 10 months, 1 year, 2 years, like literally just prolonged, 17 messages of just me in the chat. And then they eventually, like, you are the most consistent person at following up. I get that all the time because it's super important. Just because someone doesn't answer you doesn't mean that, they just hate you and they don't want your business, right? Or they're not interested. They could be busy. They could forget. It could just not be the right time. And the thing with cold outbound is it's only going to work when all of the stars align, right? If they're not in the financial place, or they're just not ready to scale, or, they're just not ready for your offer, it's not going to work. All the stars need to align. They need to be in the perfect place when they get that outbound message. And that's why you want to continuously follow up. And that's why you want to send volume automated all the time, because you're just going to make it inevitable that you hit the right person at the right time. They respond, get on a call, build a relationship, and then go from there.
I mean, that makes total sense. I mentioned this before with others, is like timeliness. And so your concept of all the stars have to align, right? So I talk about that in terms of like timeliness, relevance, and impact with your messaging, with, what your strategy is, your outreach. Makes total sense, right? Like especially when we're being sold to, we're going to want to know exactly, we're going to be in that right state of mind, and that's what we need. I think there's a recent commercial, I think with like Uber Eats or something. It plays every football game and talks about food. I think because we all associate watching football and eating. So I guess like we'll be hungry and then we'll go order Uber Eats or something.
For sure.
So that's really interesting. One of the things I've heard a lot too about so your domain reputation. I know we talk about strategies where you don't want to use your current domain. And I think that a lot of people might worry about copy, and experts say, oh, you want to have less than maybe 1% bounce rate or spam, things like that. I mean, or unsubscribe. That makes sense, right? Because you don't want it to hurt your reputation. You don't want to be frustrating people. In your opinion, and you don't have to talk about quantitatively what your business is doing, but how do you sort of get over that hump of, look, I'm going to hope that they don't decline me or unsubscribe from me to hurt my reputation. But how are you sort of creating strategies that go against helping you so that you don't see a lot of that spamming, given that it might be out of your control? People are seeing a tons of things in their inbox, and if it's definitely not the right moment and the right time, even from that one message, they could be like, I don't want people going in my mailbox anymore. I'm spamming everybody who comes in.
Right.
What do you, say to folks that are scared about doing that or getting into cold email?
Yeah, well, on the forefront, a lot of that is going to come from the copy that you're writing. If you're sending an unrelated offer to an unrelated industry, they're going to mark that as spam every time just because it's not relevant. If you have a relevant offer, and if you're targeting pharmacies and you're talking about pharmacies in your email, they're going to know that it's more relevant. And usually they're actually a lot more appreciative. Like, even if they say, no, it's not the right time, they'll say, but I appreciate the offer. So that's really kind of like the forefront, is making sure that copy is on target. And then, as far as, the domain reputation and all of that. So yeah, you never want to use your main domain when you're sending cold email. Go on GoDaddy or Namecheap or whatever your domain provider is, and just purchase a bunch of domains that are similar to your main domain, but not actually your main domain, right? And then you can go ahead and turn on domain forwarding. So if someone does go to, one of the domains that you're using for cold email, it'll direct right to your main website, right? So at least then they'll know, that those are directly correlated, and there's not really much that you can do for people, just pressing spam, but, it definitely can happen. But again, just making sure that copy is really targeted, it shouldn't be that much of a problem. Plus, all the emails that you are sending to, you want to triple verify them, put them through a verifier tool to make sure that the bounce rate is as low as humanly possible. That's a really, really big thing as well. And that'll help you avoid all of those spam filters also.
Yeah, it's like having your perfect list before you even start. You might start with 1,000 and then I'm down to a couple hundred. That's okay. But hey, those couple hundred, that's when you get that 99.9% deliverability, which is the important top of funnel metric you want to be paying attention to. Because the more you can talk to, the more chances you have at it. One thing I want to kind of go back to, we touched upon a little bit, like with X and other social media. So one strategy that I've definitely been talking about with my own clients is having that social media presence as a part of their brand, not to constantly use it as a sales channel, but create that brand recognition or social credibility that people, when you send out that case study, are you seeing that? One, are you kind of recommending that as a strategy? I know you're focused on the cold outreach, but clearly people are going to click in the citation. I want to know what this company is all about. So they're going to go look up the company, or they're going to be on social media and look up what has the company talked about. Is that a side strategy or something that you are talking with clients about? Or do you see social as a completely different animal that just, it's a channel in itself, rather than a way to create a brand. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on anything about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that I'd always recommend. Obviously, having a strong, online presence anywhere is not going to hurt you. And especially with cold email, if these people want to look you up, if they are genuinely interested in your services, they probably will. We work with a lot of clients where we make sure that their website's actually up to date before starting a campaign, just because people are going to check out your website. They're going to search up your name. They're going to search up your company name. And you want to make sure that it's completely optimized. And if you have a funnel in there as well, then that's even better. But you definitely want to make sure that you do have a really good online presence. It's not completely necessary as far as social media goes, but as far as like a website, absolutely, definitely need, up and coming website for cold email.
Yeah, legitimacy and everything. And I know, a lot of people are focused on SEO and driving, and that's, a lot of inbound, but I guess, you want to pair those strategies together. So thinking about trends and everything, right? Given you're an expert in the space, I'm really interested in hearing what your future thoughts are on cold outreach and where you think things are going to start to head, or how you think things will change.
Yeah, well, I think we're already seeing a lot of change right now. I mean, with all the, like I said before, all these updates with Google and Microsoft, now it's not recommended to actually track your open rate as of recently as well. So that's a really, really big thing, because that's a huge metric to see if people are actually opening your emails, right? If your subject line is good. Now you kind of have to rely on the response rate to kind of decide, is my copy suffering or is my subject line suffering? So that's something that makes it a bit more difficult. And I think as time goes on, we're going to see a lot more restrict with cold email. But I actually do think that's a positive instead of a negative. And why I think that is because now not as many people are going to be sending cold email. And if they are, not as many people are going to be landing in the inbox. That means if you're doing cold email correctly and optimally, and you understand all the systems, or you're working with someone who understands all the systems, you're going to stand out a lot more in a year than you are today, right? Because now you're going to be one of the only cold emails in your target audience's inbox, while everyone else is in spam or not sending at all, right? So I think, yeah, it's going to be a lot more difficult, but as long as you or someone that you know is completely up to date on all the trends, they know how to work around all of the restrictions, then you're going to be golden.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I mean, I kind of love that, because people actually start to say, where did all these people go? Well, I guess, if this guy is making it through, he must be what he does. So therefore we should go with him, right? On whatever it is he's selling.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's all about the connection. It's all about making sure that you're getting through, showing, that you're capable of doing what you're able to do. I mean, that's great. So I know we're running short on time. So is there any last thoughts or messages or things that you want to let people know of, or the myth of cold email, anything that you want to touch upon that maybe we haven't discussed here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always say cold email is just a lot of moving parts. It's far from a simple outreach message, but you should have it running 24/7. Seriously. Because, I mean, like I said earlier, you're reaching out directly to your target audience. And I mean, there is just almost nothing better than that. If you have a specific company that you want to work with, or whatever specific target audience, you can literally set up a campaign and send emails with your offer to that audience, all automated without lifting a finger, right? And especially if you're doing it with volume, if let's say you have a target market of, let's say, 100,000 business owners, you can set up a campaign, put together that verified list, and send out, let's say, 2,000 emails a day to that 100,000 people. You make it impossible for you not to build relationships, not to get on calls, not to close new deals just by doing that. And again, you don't have to lift a finger. There's plenty of systems now where all of that is automated. You don't have to send manually 2,000 emails a day. So it's something that businesses should just have on autopilot. And I think it's almost a crucial part of scaling and getting to that next level.
Yeah, I absolutely right. And worst case is, and you mentioned it earlier, is you get your brand out there, right? I mean, it may not be the right time, may not be, but whatever service or product you're offering, that person might have never heard about, and they might not even be in the market for it. So of course the timing's never going to work, but at least you put that seed in their mind to think about, wow, if this person's reaching about this particular service, I'm going to start noticing it in my environment. And I go, maybe I should reach out to that person who wrote me and find out more about this, because I just wasn't paying attention. I think that's really great. And I think one thing I wanted to point out we didn't talk about which I think you're doing awesome, is, you're getting 10 to 15 qualified on the phone, connected leads for people each week. And that is, some people might go, that's it. And I would say, that's it. That's amazing. I mean, think about your own as a business. If you were to get on the phone and just pull up a Rolodex, and just call each person in the phone book, do you think you would get in a week, first off, your time, calling 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever, for 50 hours that week? Do you think you're going to get 10 to 15 people? And plus, two, with your business, what does 10 to 15 people translate? Right. So I think that's also good to keep in mind that that is a very large number to have. And so, Justin, you're just killing it in the cold email game. And I'm so glad you're able to take some time out of your busy day to come talk with us at Fish Innovation. And want to say thank you and look forward to, what iClient Care has to do. Anybody who wants to find out more, there'll be links in the bottom that you can go check out. And I'm Ben Fish with Fish Innovation, and glad you could come innovate. Talk to you guys
Awesome.
later.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Thanks.